change management and sustaining our change. So this is really critical. I think one of the things that we wanted to make sure going into this transformation, this journey that we went on, is that I think the process updates and the training, the communication through the project were really just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much more beyond that to sustain the change and work with our organization members to make sure that this is doing for us what we needed it to do. But to start off, in the beginning, we needed to gain senior leadership support. So we did that through engaging senior leadership, providing overviews of what CSA is, what it's not, the changes intended with it, the similarities with, that conceptually this is not much different than what we knew before, right? It's just a little bit of a different mindset and way of approaching it. We conducted training throughout the process, communication and training throughout on what we were doing, what changes were coming. The educational videos we spoke to, wanted to make sure that there was information available on demand, at any time for folks to go back and reference. So, for example, Barbara mentioned the unscripted testing. We had the workshops with you, Stephen, and the compliance group got the concepts introduced, but it could be months before a team went through a change and actually needed to leverage that information. And so we have that training available, but we wanted these short on-demand videos to help reinforce those key topics. So that was key for us. The office hour sessions, Barbara mentioned those. So we set these up in the very beginning, and we've continued these. So these are just drop-in sessions. People can come get their questions addressed. We're using those to help manage change, to receive feedback. We can hear from our peers, again, what is working, what's not working, where there are questions. And I think, hearing from our peers on the adoption of the process, I think, has been really critical for us in terms of contributing to that culture change that comes with that mindset change. It's one thing for me to say it, or Stephen, for you to say it in a training. It's another thing when we hear our peers who have actually gone through the change say, oh, okay, this isn't so bad. I can do this, and this is what I found. This was my experience. I think that goes a really long way. We've continued our monthly newsletters. So as we're going through this, we started this off in the beginning, and we've continued this just to help remind folks of references available, address, frequently asked questions, keep the teams engaged in what we're doing, what we're learning, reinforce points that some topics come up multiple times, and that's expected, right? And so just reinforcing, information. We have a SharePoint site that we stood up for our journey, and so this offers a place for individuals to come and get access to training materials, contact information, the what's and the whys. We found that the effective stakeholder management is really, really key. So again, up front, one of the first steps that we took in our journey was engaging our stakeholders, across functional stakeholders. This is a change that impacted individuals in multiple areas of our organization. And so identifying those individuals and keeping them engaged in the communications, not only through the project, the phases of the project, but post the change, has been really, really critical for us to keep aligned and help people absorb all the change. Kind of plays into that measurement and analysis. So as part of our project, we defined success metrics and what we're going to do to measure the effectiveness of the change. We put into place a continuous improvement management plan outlining what and when we're going to provide oversight for and measure and analyze. So for example, looking at how we're going to measure the if the processes are being adhered to. Are we seeing trends and kappas and deviations and a decrease in those 4 key process areas, for example, because that can help indicate to us where things are working or where they're not, and we need to continuously improve. And then the last but not least, and one of the things that we did in the very beginning was through the help of compliance group, get support from FDA's Cisco Vicente and the members of the CSA FISCA team to help talk to us about what CSA is, what we can expect. This was really, really key for us to get that support from our leadership team. So that was a key upfront step that we took on our change management path. As I was speaking through these, I guess one thing I just want to reinforce, we did all these things throughout the phases of our project. But the green check marks are key. They represent things that we have been continuing to do to sustain the change. So going back to that change management methodology, right, there were a lot of steps that we took up front through the project to help manage the change that was coming with our updates to the validation program, the computer system validation program. But those things don't stop with the closure of the project. It's really critical that we continue this outreach, the communication, the support for the organization to keep the teams engaged and support that adoption.
I think Hillary, there was one thing when Cisco joined with the executive and senior management at Seagen, and this is probably my favorite story with you guys, is the senior management and the executive management wanted Cisco to answer particularly one question: how do we know we're implementing CSA right? And I loved his response at the time, because he said, how do you know you did CSV right?
Yep.
What's your story? Tell your story, defend your story, right? And Seagen was an early adopter. Seagen had actually implemented CSA tenets and principles before the draft guidance was even released, recognizing that it was still within the regulatory framework. And I think this is a great slide. I have a few additional kind of questions on it. When you talk about, could you both talk a little bit about the educational videos and the experience that you've seen in Seagen, kind of the topics that you went into on those, a little bit more about what they're about?
Sure. Yeah. So we did solicit input from organization members on what they would like to see. We have our read and acknowledge our SOPs. We have an overview training for our validation process. But for these little nuggets, what did they really want to see? And so we go into, validation 101. What is validation? Why are we doing it? How do we assess risk associated with our computer systems? How do we write an unscripted test case? How do we write a scripted test case? How do I support members on my team who are in a GXP impacting role as their manager? What does that mean for me as their manager? I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. 21 we did. I think we did the functional risk assessment. We did an overview of the functional risk assessment using the CSA concepts.
What's an audit? What's an inspection?
Yes, how to be audit and inspection ready. The importance of maintaining. The inventory. I mean, there were a number. How do I determine what deliverables I need as part of my change control based on the type of change and the type of system that I'm updating? So there were a variety of topics. It was based on input from the organization. We didn't want to just come up with a list in isolation. And so far, the feedback that we're getting has been really positive. I think it's just kind of the way our culture works now, right? I think we referred to them in our sessions together, Steve, like that TikTok culture, right? Like we like these little short videos that we can just go, somebody can read to us what we need to know, essentially, right? And I think the videos are great because they're they're visually interesting. It's a lot. You know, it's not the death by PowerPoint. So yeah, I think that helps.
Well, and to underscore listening to the audience, that we started with ideas of what videos we wanted to do, and then as Stephen was writing them, or as his company produced them, then we would see, oh, we need to change it to this. So there were feedback loops going on with the audience themselves, because some of the topics you could have a video that's an hour long. So it's like, what would be pithy, what would get to the point of what people really needed to hear. So a big part was listening to the audience and then making them short, and probably a third of them changed from what we thought people would want to see. And we noticed, like, once we started posting them on the SharePoint site, people were watching them before we had even emailed and advertised that they were there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're living in this culture, like Hillary said, where we don't go to Google anymore. We go to YouTube to look up how to do something, and we don't want the 30-minute video on it, right? Summarize it for me in 4 minutes because I'm busy. And that was the idea here, was give these practitioners that don't do this in their everyday job, right? Yes, sure, it's available for Hillary's CSV team, but what about the other stakeholders, the business owners, the system owners, that do data migration on a once-a-year basis, right? A complicated topic. And can you, you know, instead of giving me a 15-page procedure on how to do it, can you summarize what I need to know in a 5-minute video? And that was the intent here. The other thing I had to Hillary was, how did you make these videos accessible? Did you put them behind a training wall?
Oh, yes, that's a great question. Yes, so we did talk about that because we wanted them to be available on demand. We didn't require them. They are technically posed as, or framed rather, as supplemental training. But what we did is we put them in our LMS, a Cornerstone. So they're available through keyword search, and then as part of our transformation site, the validation transformation SharePoint site that we noted on the slide, we have a reference to them. So we stood up a CSV or validation program training page. So, you know, these are your available references and tools to aid you in implementing the validation processes, and that includes, of course, those educational videos.
Great, thank you. All right.